This Talking Flutes podcast is kindly sponsored by Trevor James Flutes, making life sound beautiful. You can show them some flute love by following them on Instagram at TJ Flutes, Trevor James Flutes on Facebook, and at trevorjamesflutes.com. Hello and welcome this week to Talking Flutes. Yes, I know you'll be expecting to hear Claire's voice. However, this week I'm actually interviewing her and the wonderful musician, composer and sax professor Andy Scott about two fantastic new interactive flute tutor books they have just launched. Before I do so, thank you so much for your messages and ideas for guests on future podcasts. Also for some of the subject ideas you've come up with for us to get our teeth stuck into, such as more on technical, Baroque, Irish music, and also my pet love, meditation and mindfulness episodes. So, taking it one stage further, next week on Talking Flutes Extra, we begin to look at the first of your suggestions as I have a chat with Irish and Celtic flute player and seriously talented and lovely chap, Philip Barnes. Kickstart flute is a very different flute teaching method, perfect for both beginners starting out and for those who wish to develop their style of playing and general technique. The tutorial is based around 24 duets encompassing many genres of music, written by Andy Scott, one of the most versatile and exciting composers writing today. There are 24 lessons, one for each duet, spread over 2 books. Each lesson introduces you to all the basics of learning the flute, with special emphasis on the material required to play the duets, notes, rhythms, articulations, fingerings and dynamics, plus all the information you need to develop your tone, finger technique, articulation and musicality. As the lessons progress, so your knowledge builds. There are many beginner books on the market, but in this tutorial the emphasis is on learning through the fun of playing all types of music. This book will guide you through the process and introduce you to a new way of learning the flute. There are 4 pre-lessons to introduce you to the basics of reading music, and there are also links to videos online to help with putting your flute together, holding the flute and keeping it balanced. If you can already read music, you can have a quick revision by reading through the pre-lessons and then jump straight into lesson 1. The 24 duets each have their own lesson, taking you through all the keys. Each lesson gives you the information to play the duet. Audio tracks for each of the duets are available online, offering you a choice of playing each part with Claire herself and rhythm section, or with rhythm section and a friend or tutor. As your skills develop, you can revisit the duets and play the more difficult second parts. The 24 duets cover each major and relative minor key and are written in styles including pop, swing, Afro-Cuban, bossa nova and many, many more. And you scan the QR codes throughout the book with your phone to easily access the online links. So a couple of days ago, I dialed in to speak with Claire from her home in Hove, Sussex, and Andy Scott in Sandbach, which is the north of England, to talk about their exciting new publication, Kickstart Flute, and began by asking them a typical English question about the weather. So what's the weather like up there? Andy's up north like, and Claire's going to shout at me for doing a northern accent, because she always does, because she's a northern lass. And Claire's actually not far from me, because she's down in Hove. I'm in Tunbridge Wells, and Andy is in Sandbach, which is in the north of England. Mind you, that's contentious, isn't it, north, Andy? Because England's sort of a long, narrow country.
Yeah, we're kind of mid central to getting on towards the north, I suppose. It's always at least 1 degree colder up here, though.
3 degrees, I think.
Yeah, but it's cheaper, though.
Yes, cheaper than Hove. I mean, only posh people live in Hove, you know.
I know. You've got to be a flute soloist to live in Hove.
Or an internet influencer.
Yes, absolutely.
Lovely to see you both. As my intro said, we're here today to talk about a really exciting project that was started a number of years ago, but as which you've developed into multimedia, and it's Kickstart, the Flute Project. But it's not just one book, there's 2 books. So where do we start with this? Because it obviously runs across 24 duets, doesn't it? where people can play along with Clare, or they can play as duets with somebody else, but everything has been composed by you, Andy. So where should we start? How did the project begin? What was the seed, and who watered it?
Well, maybe I should start first and then let Andy kick in there in a minute. So it was Andy that came up with the idea of flute duets and maybe doing a beginner book around those duets and maybe doing it online. But now it's been published as these two books with all the audio files online, very accessible. And, you know, they're very creative, very unique and great fun and all different genres, because I said to Andy, okay, I would like a duet in every key, so 24 duets. And from world music, I remember that from my own experiences of learning the flute, I got thoroughly bored with playing Christmas carols and nursery rhymes. So I wanted to play music of all genres, and so many books on the market are so restrictive. So I asked Andy if he could do that. And he did it. Fantastic. Over to you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Claire, and lovely to be here, Jean-Paul, as well. Thank you both. Yeah, this has just been such a wonderful project, and it continues to be. I think the whole thing about collaboration is vital, especially now when we're in sort of lockdown and this kind of isolation. Collaboration is so important. And the three of us have been collaborating for years and years now. So it was, Claire with all her performing and incredible teaching experience that put us in this position in the first place to even entertain a project like this. And then I was just lucky that we could, again, through working together a number of times, performing and on summer courses at Woldingham and events like that, we knew each other well enough to swap ideas and then know that these ideas will work. It's not as if it's a brand new collaboration and there's a high risk element. I mean, you still have to deliver the goods, don't get me wrong, but we knew that conceptually this could be a very interesting project. And as Claire said, and she had the idea of something quite different, the whole thing about different keys. It's classic, isn't it? When it's like, I know as a saxophonist, when you're teaching someone, they're doing associated board exams, they're restricted by the guides for scales and keys that you learn as you go through the grades. And so why do you have to wait all this time before you play C sharp major or something? It's just play them slowly. Anyone can play them. So, we just started all having a chat, doing the duets, and what I was able to bring to the table, I think, is as a saxophonist composer, the different styles of music I play and the different bands I play in and so on, whether that's, in a salsa band one night or a rock band or something more classical, or I could bring that sort of variety of genres and styles to the table. And the rhythm section we use, they're brilliant players. And I've worked with them a lot. Again, it was collaboration. So yeah, it's I'm just delighted because it's the books look fantastic. Bear in mind, I've throughout this process, I've seen the online material, but to actually see the hard copy book and how Claire has devised that the music then fits in these duets within her sort of overall structure of the whole concept. Anyway, that's enough from me.
What's interesting for me is whether you're a returning flute player, and this isn't just for beginners, it's those that have also been out of the flute playing fraternity, family, for a long time and have decided to come back. This is absolutely perfect for it. But when I started playing the flute donkeys years ago, the only music you could play was classical music. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but the world in the 21st century is all about now, and we have access to everything on tap, all new type of new music. And flute playing has never really had that beat, had stuff written for it at a accessible level that has a beat, and that beat that makes the foot tap, that beat that makes you feel good when you're playing it. And it's almost as though, you have these 24 duets go cover everything. And there's nothing on there that you could just sit and say, oh, I'm bored, because it takes you on a journey, each piece.
Yeah, well, Andy's got such a distinctive voice in terms of composition. He so easily combines these sort of all these different elements of jazz and world music and classical. And it just fits so nicely into all of these duets. And going back to when I said I developed it because of my experience of those books on the market, which just gave you classical. It wasn't just that it was classical or nursery rhymes or Christmas carols. It was also that you were led to believe that certain notes like A, B, G were easy, and anything with a sharp or a flat was difficult.
Yep.
The book begins on middle D, which is, again, unusual for beginner books, but it's a nice stable note. And then what happens with each duet is that each lesson is attached to each duet, and each lesson then has a focus. And the focus is to learn all the skills you need to play the duet of that lesson. So there are lots of melodies and tunes and exercises, but by the end of each lesson, you are presented with Andy's duet, and you know that you've got all the skills you need to play that duet. And the types of music, it's so exciting because we've got things like jazz and samba, pop, rock, gospel, swing, shuffle. What have I missed out, Andy?
Well, not a lot, but what I found fascinating in the book, just following along from the different styles, is that, yeah, we do. This is really good for you rhythmically, because instead of putting a metronome on and just having that horrible non-musical click, we've got world-class musicians playing, and they were playing to click track. It's all done with click track. So, and the nature of the music means we've got that kind of constant pulse going through it. But what Claire's done, I was looking through yesterday, and I suddenly remembered us sort of discussing these things years ago, which is to do with the phonetics, to do with the feel of the music. So if you get something that's where you need the sort of long and short notes, and you have the right feel, it's like the fellows, they're brilliant that I've seen you chat with, and the Latin guys.
Jose and Gio.
Yeah. I mean, they're brilliant entertainers, but they're fantastic musicians because the style of music they're playing, they've got the right kind of feel. And what Claire and myself have done, have spoken about the different styles, and Claire's put down, for example, right, in this phrase, for this rhythm, use these phonetics, da and do and d and whatever, and it helps you grasp what the feel of the music is. And that's a really, really important thing for me, because you can spot it a mile off where a really great classical player is playing these styles of music but has no idea about the feel, and it just sounds really fair. You've got it. Yeah. But and this is what Claire and myself, as I said, going back to things like Woldingham and the summer school, the amount of time that you spend together and crossing over, me listening to the flutes and vice versa, worlds that we sort of inhabit a lot of the time, stylistically. We've spoken about this a lot, and we've spoken about the phonetics and feel and stuff like that, and it's in the book. And I think that's a key difference as well with this book.
You're a brilliant composer, Andy, and you're not bound by the saxophone. You write for everything. You write symphonies, you write everything, concertos, and you're also known for writing bloody difficult music. Now, when you got together with Claire on a Kickstart project, knowing what you know and knowing what you write and are commissioned to do, how hard was it to actually say, I need to go back to the basics and write for the flute? How hard was it, or wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was. It was very challenging, actually. I think around about the same time, maybe just before, I'd done some work for the Associated Board. They contacted a number of composers and said, can you write us I had to write 112 sight reading tests for the Associated Board, go from grade 1 to grade 8. So I was like, they give you really strict guidelines. Everything's written out. So for grade 1, you can only use like crotchets and minims. And these are your tempo markings, and it has to be 4/4. So I think I'd done that kind of project and had those guidelines just before doing this. And then it was a kind of combination of things. But again, it was wonderful because I could send some music to Claire and say, listen, what do you think of this? Or is this going to be okay? Or does this need changing? It's this whole thing of collaboration again, which is just the best way. I love that, whatever the commission or project is.
Yeah, I mean, did Claire just give you the brief? Is that we want it to be for beginners, we want it to be for people returning, kickstarting themselves back, and then you're having to put yourself into that position on, okay, what is going to be manageable without being too hard?
I'm trying to remember, Claire, exactly how we...
Yeah, I mean, what I remember is that I said I wanted to use all the keys. And I wanted them to be challenging. They are challenging, but they're rewarding. And I didn't want to aim it just at kids. I wanted it to be a starter book that could be for anybody. And then we restricted sort of notes and rhythms. But someone's just messaged me today saying how much they're enjoying them, and especially right at the beginning that you've introduced offbeats and syncopation.
Yeah.
It's not, we're not saying, look, this is difficult. We're just saying we're presenting it and telling you how to play it. And I think that that's fantastic that people beginning the flute can learn these skills. And then when they play with the duets, as you were saying, Andy, that sense of rhythm is there because of the rhythm section.
But everybody has a sense of rhythm, don't they, Claire? Because we all listen to music. And so if we're listening to David Guetta doing Titanium or something, we hear the beat. If we're listening to Katy Perry, we hear a beat. And yet we put the flute up our musical instrument and suddenly we become, ugh, and we see the beats, but we don't necessarily feel it. I think with this, you've actually managed to notate it, but also you have that feel of the beat with these brilliant musicians in the background that sort of encourage you to let go.
Yeah, and the instruments are, we've got bass guitar, keyboards, and drums and percussion. And the musicians were just phenomenal. And I remember, because you were there at the recording session, JP, and we spent the first part of the recording session just doing the backing tracks. And it was incredible, the skill. And I remember I was almost sort of too tired to record afterwards because we had to listen. We were recording the tracks for 3 hours, and then I had to put my 2 flute parts on. And I played all the flute parts on a Trevor James 10X flute, a beginner flute.
You did that on purpose, didn't you? Rather than get your beautiful platinum Miyazawa out, you decided to play it on a first flute, the flute that somebody would normally start or return back to playing, didn't you? Is that just so you could prove that it's achievable on whatever you start with?
Absolutely. To show it doesn't matter what sort of flute you have, you can still play, and you can still play well. So I think the only difficulty I had was the fact that I play open G sharp flute, and my 10X was a closed G sharp, so I had to really concentrate quite hard.
That's weird, because we've actually got an open G sharp version now, thanks to you and David.
I'll have to put my order in then, JP.
That was, I remember that day, though. It was a massively long day for you, Claire, because these duets are more relevant than ever now on a practical level because of all the online teaching. Because what everyone receives, as well as the book, is with the backing tracks, you've got you can listen to Claire playing both parts of the duet with the backing track. And then you've got a choice. You can play part 1 or part 2, and Claire plays the other one. So you're playing the duet, or you've just got the rhythm section. So when we're able to, you could play with a friend or with your teacher. So for online teaching now, I know I'm saying myself, but they're brilliant because the teacher can say, let's look at track 14, part 1, put the track on where Claire's playing part 2. and do it like that. But it was a massively long day for you because 24 duets, recording both parts. It was about 11 o'clock in the evening and we started at 10 in the morning. You did brilliantly, I remember.
What was interesting for me watching it was those compositions were inside your head, Andy. So the percussionist would start, and then he would play something, and then there'd be a keyboard. But then you would go back to redo something because there was a feel that you wanted to come out before Claire came in with her parts. And it was really interesting to see the composer actually on the recording, putting their feel, because the musicians are brilliant, but they're also reliant on the composer taking them in a direction. Yeah, everybody, it's helpful, especially with new music, that you can't refer to any recordings of it or anything like that. It's brand new, they're hearing it for the first time. So to speed up that recording process, it's just a way of communicating the direction that you want. And with Dave Hassel playing drums, crikey.
Dave's amazing. And we've worked together for so long. He knows. I can say to him, just that Kenny Garrett track, or when Stan Getz played this, or when Philly Joe Jones played drums on this. It's a bit like that. And so quite often, if you give a reference or as a kind of direction, it helps as well. And it comes back to what you said, JP. It's all about listening. And this is what gives us the feel with the music. You can't just play swing, for example, if you've never listened to it. You can have some phonetics that might help you get there, but it's exactly what you said. It's sadly not all of us do listen, but I think the good musicians do. And I mean, just sitting down and properly listening, so you need this for these different feels.
There's a podcast in itself, isn't it? Sitting down and actually listening to individual parts, not always the whole. Sort of listen to the drums, listen to the bass, go in between the lines.
That's what John Coltrane did. I was reading a book about John Coltrane, and apparently when he'd been in the recording studio, he listened to a track, or when someone else's recording, he'd listen to it. If it was a jazz quartet, he'd listen to it 5 times, a track, and the first 4 would be focusing on each individual instrument, and on the 5th listening, he'd listen to the whole group.
That just
incredible.
Says it all, really, doesn't it? Should we listen to a piece?
Sounds like a good idea.
Which piece should we listen to, Claire? Should we go straight into the first piece in book 1, simply called Pop?
Why not?
Well, that was great. I mean, what a happy little ending. So a nice little short piece with a repeat in D, and the second part having the lovely little run up at the end. And as you say, Claire, you can play the first part, you can play the second part, and it's brilliant for teachers. And I've just received the books this morning, which anyone who's watching this on video, you can see it's actually beautifully bound. And it has changed. The whole project's changed since I first became aware of it, because it's not only a duet book, it's a tutor book as well. And that's one thing to bring out. It's not just playing duets. That's an inherent part of it, but of the learning process, but you're actually teaching people to play.
Yeah, it's learning the flute.
Yeah.
And also learning to love all styles of music.
Learning to love all styles of music. Yeah.
Rather than be pigeonholed or restricted. It's opening your ears to all types of music, which I know I never had. And I must say, just doing this project, thanks to Andy, I've learned an awful lot about world music as well, because I sort of researched each style of piece as I was writing it. And I listened to a lot more, and I learned a lot about the music. So it's opened my ears to a lot more, which I'm very grateful.
It can only be a positive thing if younger people, and it doesn't have to be younger, because people reboot themselves at various ages, but if they don't pigeonhole themselves to having to play the old tune a day book type of music, to actually come in at a level where you've got different beats, different syncopations, and actually can be more free with your music, which therefore means that you're enjoying yourself, you're playing it for enjoyment rather than necessarily wanting to be brilliant early on. Enjoyment is the key.
And they are great fun. I mean, I love listening to them now. The music is stunning. And I think if you're learning and having fun, you learn in a much better way, and your learning will continue. It's very difficult to get bored. You don't get bored with this music. And they are challenging. And I think that's important, because the flute, more than any other instrument, it's a very easy instrument. And it's easy to get started. It's easy to get playing things very quickly. So I'm hoping this tutor will push people in a slightly quicker way. And so, I mean, I said in the first lesson, you're immediately playing something that's great fun with a great rhythm that's challenging as well.
I think it was interesting as well, knowing the musicians that you're writing for and knowing what the overall brief is as well, and then bringing in different influences. For example, there's one groove I absolutely love just in general, which is this kind of New Orleans second line. It's just so infectious as a groove. When Dave plays it, it's amazing on drums, because he's just got his own sound on drums. His snare drum and bass drums sound like no one else playing it. So we've got these kind of really infectious grooves, but also Dave plays a lot of percussion, and there's one track where we've got this crazy experimental duo. And he brings all sorts to the gig, all sorts of percussion instruments. And he's even got some squeaky toy animals. So there's one duet where he's got these little squeaky pigs. And I thought, yeah, right, we're going to have that. We're going to use them on a track. So it goes to like the B section in this particular track. And he stops playing drums and he plays these squeaky pigs.
It doesn't. I can't remember which one it is, Andy.
No, I can't remember. But the one that tickles me, I shouldn't say it myself, but is there's one where Claire and I was talking about just taking a scale, and I think it might have been we were doing F sharp major or minor.
It's F sharp major, isn't it?
Right. So we
call it heavy funk.
Right, and I just thought, wouldn't it be good if we could have if scales practice wasn't not boring, because scales practice for someone who's really listening and intelligent is like proper practice, but I just had this idea of having a really sort of funky rhythm section behind a couple of players playing a scale, and that came about because years ago I was in the Royal Northern College watching this masterclass, and this sax player was playing, this uber classical guy from Japan, and then halfway through this very serious piece he was playing, a drummer in the student union started knocking 10 bells out of this drum kit, playing a rock groove, and it leaked through really loudly into this room. And everyone was running around panicking, thinking, oh no, we've got to stop this drummer from. I was thinking, this is great. This sounds brilliant. Contemporary music over a groove. Fantastic.
Right, shall we have a quick listen? Now it's track 17. It's 11 lesson 17. Let's have a quick listen to Heavy Funk by Andy Scott. Andy, I can only think of that sax player now. That very intense Japanese sax player at the Royal Northern.
It was so funny, but isn't it funny? I mean, we've all had it, where you get these spontaneous events that have happened in our lives that then years later, something it might be a way, you write a little bit in one of the lessons or phrase something or say something. They suddenly, little bits suddenly go years later.
I mean, heavy funk and flute, that doesn't really go together in one sentence, does it? So I've got both books open. And so we start with a pop waltz, and then we go for folk rock, pop ballad, a samba, exotic, then a shuffle. That shuffle looks really interesting, by the way. A rock, then there's the ambient, and there's chilled. Funk, gospel, bossa nova, heavy funk, skiffle, oriental, Celtic folk, New Orleans, Afro-Cuban, funky soul. What's skiffle?
Skiffle is like the thing where, crikey, how do you describe it? Again, I'll keep on coming back to Dave. You should do a podcast with Dave Hassel. Now, he's got this metal tie. So it's like a tie that you wear, but it's metal and it's corrugated.
Right.
And what he plays it. Mm-hmm. So it's like and that's the one where in the B section he goes from this metal tie to the pigs, squeaky pigs in the B section. So skiffle is a kind of, oh God, what is it?
I'll tell you, I wrote about it in the book.
Right.
Skiffle is a style of music played on basic or homemade instruments. So it's a mixture of jazz, blues, folk music, popular in the UK in the 1950s before musical instruments were of reasonable price. Instruments were made from all sorts of materials, so whatever was available.
Washboard.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
big.
Yeah. And what Dave does, it's a kind of, it's almost like a 1920s kind of early swing feel in that one. But it's lovely. You don't know what's coming next. The flute parts in that one as well. I was thinking, what would go with that? And I was thinking about the articulation and a staccato. And I'm showing my age now, but I couldn't help thinking about that. Some mothers do have them. Remember the theme tune to that?
Yes.
The skiffle is the fact that, yes, the articulation is different. It's very precise. But the flutes have got to really listen to the backing track for the rhythm, for the pulse. And that really keeps you it's a really tight rhythm. It keeps you, makes you very disciplined.
Let's have a listen of a bit of skiffle, shall we? Do you know what's great about that is you do have to listen. You have to listen to the backing, which isn't a link in to the need to listen to a pianist when you're playing in a concert or recital or playing to instrumentalists around you. And I just want to speak to Andy here on this, because Andy's part of the most brilliant sax group that if you didn't listen to each other, my word, it would just go completely awry. You don't play the dots. It's almost so you're in sync with each other. How do you learn to listen, as in listen properly? You can read, but you've also got to be aware of the people you're playing with, the pianist or the group.
No, it's really interesting, and I'm still it's a constant challenge. And I don't know how Claire feels about this. You can become so self-obsessed as a musician, and then when you're on stage, quite rightly, because you care about the music, and you care about not messing it up for anyone around you and things like that. If you know your part so well that you can then actually kind of relax a little bit and focus in on someone else in the group or the whole group when you're playing, and not let that stress that is associated with our job, performing a musical instrument in front of people, not let that sort of come to the front of your mind. So I guess some preparation, so you know the part really well, so you're not having to really get the blinkers on looking at the paper, memorizing some little corners of the music, and then just really listening. I keep saying to Rob Buckland in the Apollo Quartet, he plays soprano, I play tenor. I said, I'm just trying to make you sound good, Rob. I'm just listening to your phrases because you've got most of the tunes on soprano. Listen, I'm just following your shape. I'm making you sound good. I hope you appreciate it.
No, Rob wouldn't. Yes, he would. Yes, he would. So the thing is, we're talking to you today as a composer.
Yeah.
But for these, if you're listening to this as a flute player, check out Andy Scott and check out the Apollo Quartet. They are stunning. And it's not like a sax quartet you would normally listen to. They play all genres of music, and they are so tight. If I was to see the music they're right there sort of playing, I would not know how they're coming in exactly at the right time. And that is to do with feel, isn't it? A, knowing the music, and B, understanding the feel of what you're playing.
Yeah, I think it's feel, but it's confidence as well. And again, this is strange actually, because I'm going back to Woldingham again. The number of years we did that summer school, well, me a lot less than Claire, of course, because it was Claire's started it. It was her venture and everything. But the reason I mention it again is because it's this thing of collaboration and developing an understanding of how people work. And it's like anything, isn't it? It's like, it just takes time to get that sort of, feeling comfortable with someone and knowing how they play and how they're reacting, coupled with trying to build some confidence and be able to really listen. It's a fascinating world. There's so many things. There are so many elements to what we do.
There is, and I've sat in one of Claire's classes years ago, and it's all about listening. She was talking about you're playing, but you're not listening. And I remember, I can't remember who it was, but they were playing, I don't know if it's 4A Fantasy or something, and you were saying it's coming over, but you're not listening to the piano. So therefore, it's almost two parts separately rather than one intertwined.
The problem of a flute being a flute, well, a single line instrumentalist is that you often start always on your own, listening to one line and never aware of what's going on underneath, which is why these duets work very well, because you've got
absolutely
all that harmony underneath and that rhythm.
So, yeah, and I think, I learned a lot from Claire, the trio that we had a few years ago with Lauren, so flute, saxophone and harp. And yeah, just in those rehearsals and the gigs that we did, just the whole thing about balancing and articulation and how someone uses vibrato, everything, and of course that helped enormously when I was writing these duets.
Yeah, and I also remember, Andy, years ago, back at the Woldingham flute course, I had a recital. After the recital, you said, in that third piece you played, what was that last note you played? I love that last note. I want to use that note. Don't we remember that? And then you wrote a flute piece, and you included this note, but in terms of a focus on it. So it was really I thought so funny at the time.
Funny. Well, it's funny because sometimes I look back and I come out with a comment like that, and sometimes musicians take them the wrong way. Because I remember I was watching a gig once, and there was a great drummer, a friend of mine, and I said to him at the end of the gig, there was one track where he started playing less and less and less, and in the end he stopped playing in the middle of this piece. It was beautiful. It was like a ballad or something, but then he came back in and it just had this wonderful shape. And I said, Steve, I really loved it tonight when you stopped playing. And he just looked at me. It's like, no, I'm sorry, you know what I mean. But that's probably what happened with this note that you played, Claire. There was something at that point in time, in that space, at that moment. Something. Sometimes when we were listening, or something magical happens, and it can just be for a split second sometimes. But and then it's it stays with you somehow.
So is your brain full, Andy? Do you, when you compose and you have commissions all the time, do you have to sort of try and wipe the slate clean and start with this new inner visual? How do you start as a composer?
I like to have some thinking time, definitely. So I might be working on one piece of music, but knowing that in a month's time I'm starting a different piece or commission. So you might be just driving in the car or walking or doing the washing up in the kitchen, but you're kind of thinking, not specific notes or anything like that maybe, but you're getting the kind of concept in your head. I imagine, Claire, for you with this publication, it was a similar kind of, it's a concept, isn't it? It's a work of art.
It's like a puzzle in that you have, as you said, you have ideas about the concept, and then bits start to slot into the spaces as time goes along. And then as you start to develop different trains of thought, and eventually they come and join and meet up and become something a bit more concrete.
Well, having looked at I'm only flicking through the books for the first time because the postman only bought them 20 minutes before we came on. Very opportune, that, isn't it?
Brilliant.
But it's so comprehensive. It is over and above what I actually expected it to be, Claire, which is not just 24 duets. It is a complete tutor book with the duets as an integral part of it. And it is, I think you have to get both albums, 1 and 2, because they flow naturally into each other.
Yeah, I hope to make sure that all the information you needed to be a pretty competent flute player would be in there. Plus this development of knowledge of different music. So it's a book where you learn about music and about the fun of different types of music. And you're learning the flute through the fun of this music, rather than just struggling trying to learn the flute on its own.
Well, it's a great name, Kickstart Flute, Book 1 and Book 2 by Clare Southworth, with 24 brilliant tracks composed by Andy Scott, and it's published by the wonderful Astute Music. And where can people get it, Claire?
Well, they can buy direct from Astute Music, which is astute-music.com, plus the normal flute shops, whether it be Flute World in the States, Just Flutes, or All Flutes Plus.
Kickstartflute.com, go to, and then you can get links off there to buying it.
Yeah, or my website, claresouthworthflute.com. We'll put all the information on the Talking Flutes Facebook page.
Website, Facebook page. They're brilliant. I've had too much coffee. That's the problem.
It's easy done at the moment with all this zooming as well, isn't it?
It is. My eyes, God, there. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been wonderful to catch up with Andy after such a long time. And Claire, I'm always seem to see your smiling face every other week doing these podcasts.
The podcast is great, by the way. I've listened to loads of them. I'm not just saying that. Claire knows I have. And it's fantastic.
Oh, you're really sweet.
I love it. And the thing is, you don't have to be a flute player to learn stuff. It's like the book. The way Claire takes you through things, it's just music.
Yeah,
and it's great.
And on that, I will say that it's not just dots. Within each lesson, there is a QR code, which you just hover your phone over and it takes you to a YouTube video. So it's very interactive. So it's not just look at the dots. There is stuff online. Learn at your own pace, play duets. It's a no-brainer, really. So astute-music.com, claresouthworthflute.com. And it was lovely for me to have a little involvement, even from the side. And I wish you both much success with this project. Should we play out with another one of your tracks?
Okay, now which one to pick? I think we should pick the last one, number 24, which is a light bossa.
A light bossa. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy, Claire, thank you so much. And
thank you.
And look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. You lovely people.
And you too.
You charmer. Thanks, Andy.
Nothing changes there, does it? He's taken my mantle. I'm jealous.
No chance. No chance.
Take care, all.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
How lovely to speak with Clare and Andy. And I really do hope Kickstart Flute is a great success. Go and check the website out at kickstartflute.com. Please also like the Talking Flutes podcast channel via whatever podcast provider you are listening on to ensure that you are automatically receiving each week's episode. Continue to send in your comments to flutepodcasts@gmail.com or via our Talking Flutes Facebook page or Instagram at TJFlutes or at Clare Flute and Twitter at Flute, which is me, or at Clare Flute, which is Claire. Next week, I'm back again with a Talking Flutes extra episode on Irish flute playing with the wonderful Philippe Barnes. So until then, wishing you a wonderful musical week ahead. And may your pianissimo high F sharp be particularly easy and in tune. Goodbye. Talking Flutes and Talking Flutes Extra are podcast productions by the Trevor James Flute Company. For more information, visit trevorjamesflutes.com.